how's it going? Listen, I am so excited to bring you this series of podcasts. My name is Derrick Hill, and my whole passion and mission is to build sustainable nonprofit organizations, like to make sure that you're the best at what you do. And so this podcast series, not just this one, but the entire podcast series is really designed to help you build a successful, sustainable nonprofit organization. And it doesn't matter if you are a brand new nonprofit organization or you 5 or 6 years old, just in the middle, or even a mature nonprofit organization. This podcast series is definitely for you. There are 3 different things that we're going to accomplish throughout this entire series. 3 things. The first thing is making sure that you have the resources that you need to build a sustainable and successful nonprofit organization. The reality of the fact is, in order to have a impactful nonprofit organization, you're going to have the resources. And so my goal is to make sure that you have the resources, but not just the tangible resources, but the monetary resources as well. Because, the majority of nonprofit organizations never reach their full potential because of one thing, and that's the lack of funding and or the lack of resources. So during this entire podcast series, my goal is to make sure that I empower you, give you the tools, the resources, the information that allow you to grow and take your nonprofit organization to the next level. So that's the first thing, making sure that you have the resources and the financial capacity to grow your nonprofit organization. And then the second aspect is your volunteers and your staffing. That is gigantic. For you to be able to have a nonprofit organization that's going to have some levels of sizable impact, there has to be some kind of human capital, people. And so one of the things that we're going to focus on throughout this entire series, and when I say series, every single week, I want you to stay locked in. Make sure you stay locked into this podcast, because every week I'm going to give you a new podcast that's going to give you some really, really strong information that's going to be able to grow your nonprofit organization. But we're going to be looking at that staffing. And, staffing is paramount, because without people, without volunteers, then the lift is going to be solely on that executive director or that founder or that person who started that nonprofit organization. And, so many times I often hear the executive director or the nonprofit leader say, man, I feel like I'm doing this by myself. And, the reality of it is, a nonprofit organization, you were never, and I repeat, you were never designed to do this by yourself. This is not even the makeup. A nonprofit organization should not be ran just by one individual, but it takes a collective effort of board members, volunteers, key stakeholders to make sure that your nonprofit organization is thriving and growing to the next level, because it takes a lot to have really sizable impact. And then the last piece that we're going to focus on throughout this entire experience is going to be your board development / programming. So again, your board development / programming. And the reason that I put a / programming there is because your board of directors, those are the individuals that are really, really, really going to help you thrive programmatically. And so, but it's going to be important that we have a strong, sustainable, board of directors in place. So I'm going to really be, those are the things that I'm going to be focused on throughout this entire series. Every single week, you're going to be getting some amazing information. Again, you're going to get resources. I'm going to give you information. And when you get information, information just takes you to the next level. It literally grows your organization to the next level. Focusing on your resources, your financial capacity. We're going to look at volunteerism. We're going to look at that staffing piece, which is huge. We're going to dive into your board of directors, and then we're going to look into your programming. So those are the aspects. Again, make sure you chime in just a little bit about me. My name is Derrick Hill, and the majority of work that I do is in the space of raising money. I love raising money to support nonprofit organizations and raising money in the area of grant writing, going after government grants, and we'll talk about government grants. We'll talk about that probably another few weeks, but we'll talk about government grants, foundation grants, and we'll talk about corporate giving and look at individual giving. And there's so many different ways. A lot of people ask me, well, what can I do to get a grant? How do I get a grant? I get that question asked so many times. And believe it or not, folks, it's not just about the grant. When programming is strong, money follows great programming. That's just the bottom line. When the programming is strong, money follows that. So let's get out of the atmosphere, the mindset for just a moment of grants, because we're going to get to that point. But right now, I really want to dive in for this particular podcast. I want us to take a look at the proposal. And in order to get money, like in order for a nonprofit organization to receive any kind of funding, the baseline, whether it's a grant, whether it's you're writing a letter to some friends or some coworkers or family members, or it's a corporate sponsorship, the bottom line, the single thing that you're going to need is a proposal. Hands down, you're going to need a proposal. And so for just the next few moments, I really want to dive into like this proposal writing. Proposal writing is going to be key. Now, hear me clearly. After this and throughout this entire podcast, you can definitely fire your grant writer, and you never have to look for a grant writer, because ultimately, you as the executive director or as the leader of your nonprofit organization, as the chair, as even one of the staff members, volunteers, everybody in this organization should know how to construct some level of a proposal. So again, I want to make sure. So that's what we're getting ready to dive into. And I'm going to look at just a few elements of what goes into that proposal. So a couple of things that goes into a proposal is your executive summary. So take note of this. One of the most, I would say the most important aspects of any proposal is going to be that executive summary. And the executive summary is like the umbrella statement, or is your case summary of the entire proposal. Now, if your executive summary is really strong, and if you have a board member or anyone, make sure that they're reading your information and making sure that it sounds good. But listen to this. If a funder goes past and reads past your executive summary, you're in business. That's a good shot. The executive summary, that's kind of one of the most important points. That's going to be the face of the organization. That's going to be the face of your particular proposal. And really, it's going to talk about a portion of that is why. Like, there has to have a need statement in there. And, like when you think about why you're writing this proposal for funding, there has to be this thing called a need statement. And your need statement is really the compelling statement of why you're doing what you're doing. It has to be so compelling that the funder or the reader will say, you know what? I need to make a financial contribution to this organization. So again, inside of this executive summary, you're going to make sure you have to have a statement of needs. That's your need statement. That's going to be very important to understand, because you're letting the funder know this is what you're doing, and this is the need for it. And let's just take an example. So let's just say you are writing a proposal for a mentoring program that works with children. There is a need that the mentoring program has to address. Your job as the one who's writing proposal is to really write that need statement so compelling that when a funder sees it, it makes sense. Like, now I have to give some level of resources to this. Inside of this executive summary, you want to really talk about kind of the project description. This is when you're going to talk about like some of the nuts and bolts of of what you're doing. And what I mean by nuts and bolts, like really kind of dive deep into it of exactly what you're doing so that the funder can see exactly what you're saying. Now, for the sake of kind of not an argument, but for the sake of just kind of putting together a framework, let's focus your executive summary to be one page. All right. Executive summary, make your executive summary just one page. And so now we know in the executive summary, we have the statement of need. In addition to that, now we have the project description. This is like the nuts and the bolts of why you're doing what you're doing. It's the nuts and bolts. And in addition to the nuts and bolts, like this is where the funder gets the opportunity to really see exactly what you're doing. Now, again, this is where you can be detailed and very specific. However, in the course of your proposal, you're going to take a deeper dive into the project and the project description. So be specific, but at the same time, give an overview so that you still have some content left as you're writing your proposal. So again, we're looking at that, that project description, which is going to be monumental. Again, all I'm focusing on right now is that executive summary, that one-page executive summary, because let me tell you something. When you get that one-page executive summary, man, and if a funder reads past that, you're in business. But I'm going to tell you something. If that funder does not read past that executive summary, there's a challenge. And so we really want to make sure that we're spending time in our executive summary. In addition to that, we want to look at putting some budgetary notes in there. In the executive summary, you want to let the funder know this is how much you're asking and why you're asking for this much. You know, a lot of times people shy away from asking the funder for an amount, but don't allow a funder to have to dig through 5, 6, 7, 8 pages of your proposal and still have not found how much you are asking. So again, in your executive summary, make sure you give a cost. Let the funder know you're seeking X amount of dollars, but also give a reason why. Now, you don't have to give a full-scale budget within your particular proposal or in the executive summary because your budget is going to come later on. But again, so we're looking at that executive summary. Make sure you let that funder know exactly how much you're asking for right up front. Next in that executive summary, we certainly want to give some organizational history. Now, when I talk about organizational history, I'm meaning like looking at like why the organization was born and what is the content of the organization and the context of the organization, and also spell out like what are your primary activities, the audiences and the services that you provide. Because let me tell you something, it's going to be incredibly important that inside of your executive summary, the funder understands and knows a little bit about the history of your nonprofit organization. It's also important to let the funder know that this is a 501c3. Typically, you'll always attach your 501c3 designation letter to any proposal, but it's always still good to highlight and underscore that your organization is a 501c3 organization. That can go inside of like the history of the structure of the organization, because that funder, again, when you look at the proposal or the funder, again, these are just people who don't really know anything about your program, your services, or about your agency. So now, oftentimes when we're talking about like your particular organization and giving information about the organization, many times we want to just go overboard and, and throw the kitchen sink at them. You don't have to do that. You do not have to give the entire information about your organization, but the funder does need to understand key things: the primary activities, the audience, and the services. And you can certainly give them the history of when the organization was formed. I will also highlight successes. Funders love to hear and give to success. So again, if there are areas in your particular nonprofit organization where you're really thriving, you want to make sure that you highlight those things, like really bring those things out to the forefront. Why? Because that funder wants to see success, because ultimately Funders like to give to organizations that are having sustainable and sizable impact. Remember this, funders give to impact. And the last thing we want to have in our executive summary is a kind of conclusion. The conclusion is this big why. Like, why are you writing this funder? Why are you having this proposal? Why are you asking for money? So inside of your executive summary, you want to have a conclusion, but it will not be phrased as your conclusion. It will be your statement of why. Now, don't put like WHY and then, write in it. But what I'm suggesting that you do is look at your overall arching, why does this service, does this activity exist? And what are you looking to accomplish with this? Spelling out the why in your executive summary, oh my goodness, that piece alone helps get the funder to read beyond your particular proposal. Now, when you're thinking about so those are all of the elements that go into the executive summary. Here's the beautiful part. Like if you're going after like a smaller grant, let's just say a $3,000 grant or $5,000 grant, a lot of organizations and agencies, all they want to see is that executive summary, that one pager. So for larger particular grants, the executive summary is a part of the total proposal. But there are a lot of agencies that will take that executive summary as enough. So as you're looking at writing your executive summary in that proposal, and again, all we're focusing on for this particular session of this podcast is building a strong executive summary. But now this proposal writing is going to be in a series. So make sure, again, every single week you're really chiming in as we're helping you really build that proposal. But right now, what I wanted to do is just focus exclusively on that particular executive summary. Now, as you're looking for funders and now you say, okay, I have this amazing executive summary, but now who do I send it to? Okay, so let's look at the individual donors. Individual donor giving, that should represent the largest giving pool within your organization. A lot of times people are like, well, let me get a grant, or I want to get a grant, and let me get a grant. Let me tell you what happens with grants. You can get a grant for 2 years or a 3-year grant from the same funder, but you can better believe that that grant has a start date and it also has an expiration date. And when the grant expires, the funding ultimately expires. So you don't want to be in a situation where you receive the grant and now the grant is gone and you have to stop programming. So let's allow grants to be, a great friend of mine said, grants should be the gravy. That's it. So allow grants to be the gravy. Allow the grants to enhance what you're doing, but don't rely on a grant to be the be all to what you're doing. So now as we're looking at your funding, I want you to pay close attention to individual donor giving. That should be the highest level of giving, individual donor giving. And here's why, because individuals, you can cultivate individuals. Like you can go back to that individual and you can say, okay, here, here's a plaque or here's an award, because you'll be able to cultivate those individual givers. But without the portion of with a funder, it's hard to cultivate a funder, because a funder or grantor has a specified time of that particular grant. That grant is going to start on this month, this year, and this day, and it will end in this month, this year, and this day. There is a start and then there's an expiration. However, with individual donors, there is a start, but there is no expiration. So since there's not an expiration, you can cultivate that individual donor to make sure that you're sending thank you letters, newsletters. Donors and individual donors really want to see the kind of impact that you're having. And you can do that Now, also, you can do that with a grant as well. But I'm telling you, there's nothing like a personal touch where someone writes you a check for $500 and now you're cultivating that relationship. Inside of the funding space, relationships are key. Relationships are pivotal. When you think of a relationship, you think of it as where there's individual pouring into an individual, and then individual is reciprocating that back. The more you give, then the more you get, the more you receive. And that's just how the individual funding space works. The more information you give, the more impact you provide, the more that you'll give and get in return. And as you're looking at individual donor giving, you might have a donor who gives anywhere between $150 and $300. You know what's beautiful about that? That one gift of $300, that gift can go on and on and on. And what I mean by on, every year that individual can give you $350. But guess what? That one individual knows so many other individuals. So when you look at individual donor giving, you don't just look at it as just one individual. You look at it as this one individual is connected to 50 individuals. So just imagine if that one individual, that initial donor, gives you $350 a year, but then turns around and asks 50 of his friends to give you $350, then look how that $350 has grown by 50, and you didn't even do anything but provided information and provided impact. So I want you to really take a deep dive in and look at that individual giving space. Now, who are these individual givers? These are your friends, your family members. These are individuals that are closely connected to your organization. Not only they're closely connected to your organization, but these are individuals also that you've worked with. What I would like for you to do, here's a strategy. Write the names of 50 individuals who you know that will give you $200. That's it. I want you to just write the name of 50 individuals that you know that will give you just $200. That's it. $200, 50 people. And once you get that list, then you'll put together your letter. And throughout the podcast series, I'll be showing you how to create your letter. And once you create your letter and you have those names, and then you start making the ask to those individuals. Now, here's what's going to happen. Some of them are going to give it to you, and some of them may not. However, just because they did not give it to you does not mean the cultivation stops at that particular time. In fact, cultivation actually begins the moment they say no. Because the only reason that they said no, it wasn't that they couldn't afford it, is that you didn't give them enough information to say yes. No never means no. No means you simply did not give that individual donor enough information to say yes. On the other side, when the check is written, that doesn't mean that the individual donor giving has stopped. Guess what? It actually moves into the next level of cultivation. Thank you. People want to feel appreciated. People want to feel, like they are valued, like they did something for your organization. So you want to show them how that $200 you provided gave them sizable, that has supported your organization in a sizable way. All I wanted to do this particular podcast is focus on your executive summary. We just focus solely on your executive summary. Make sure you stay locked into all of the podcasts during this series, because I guarantee you, every single week, you're going to go to a next level. Every week is going to be more information that's going to take you to the next level and grow your organization. Also, I want you, make sure that you register for the 90 days to grow your nonprofit organization course. The course is absolutely phenomenal. Like, everyone is taking this course. So again, make sure you register, and I'll be giving you details at the end of this podcast, but make sure that you register for your course. It's the 90 days to grow your nonprofit organization. The course is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Well, again, Folks, my name is Derrick Hill. Thank you so much for chiming on. I look forward to seeing you and hearing from you next time.